Pick up an American helmet from the Second World War, and it comes apart in your hands. There is the steel pot everyone knows, the shape stamped on every poster and every newsreel of that war. And inside it, held by nothing but friction and a rim, there is a second helmet, a separate shell of pressed fiber with a web of cotton straps suspended across the inside of it. Two objects, two helmets, worn one inside the other, by every American soldier who went ashore anywhere. Ask why, and the answers you will find are about comfort. They are wrong. The reason those two pieces were never joined is that the army needed to keep them exactly 1 inch apart, and that inch is the part of the helmet that saved men's lives. If you want more of this kind of thing, the archive is worth subscribing to. Start with what the army thought it was building. In the spring of 1941, the Ordnance Department settled a design it had been arguing over since the last war. The outer shell would be Hadfield manganese steel, drawn in one piece, and it would do the protecting. That is stated flatly in the Ordnance Department's own account, published in 1942. Protection was afforded by the outer shell. The liner was described in different language altogether: suspension, fit, a light headpiece a man could wear on its own behind the lines, without carrying 2.5 pounds of steel on his neck all day. So the two-piece design was not sold as a ballistic idea. It was sold as a practical one. 22 million of them were made, most by McCord Radiator in Detroit and Schlueter in Illinois. And within 2 years, the silhouette of that shell was the face of the American Army. Then the wounded started coming back, and the Army began measuring what the helmet, Weyerner, had really done. Here is the thing nobody tells you about a steel helmet that works. It does not stay the shape it started. When an M1 defeated a fragment at combat velocity, the steel did not simply turn it aside. The shell caved inward at the point of impact, sometimes deeply, and the metal traveled with it. Which means the question that decides whether a man lives is not whether the steel holds. It is whether the steel, once it has bent, has anywhere to go that is not the inside of his skull. The Army's own wound ballistics historians wrote the number down. When a helmet defeats a missile at service weapon velocities, they wrote, it will be deeply indented, and it was deemed necessary to allow a 1 inch offset between the helmet and the head. 1 inch, not a fitting allowance, a crumple zone. That is what the liner is for. Not to cushion the blow and not to make the helmet comfortable, though it did. The liner exists to hold a man's head in the center of a steel shell that is deliberately, permanently 1 inch too big for him, so that when the shell deforms, it has an inch of empty air to deform into before it reaches bone. The protection is not in the steel. The protection is in the gap, and the second helmet is the machine that holds the gap open. Once you know that, the rest of the helmet's strange history stops being trivia. Take the manual. There is a story that gets repeated constantly, that the Army forbade men from wearing the bare shell without its liner. Look for the order and it is not there. What is there in Field Manual? 21-15 of April 1945 is a short list of things a soldier was told never to do with his helmet, and one of them is stranger than the myth. Do not use it as a seat. Do not use it as a shovel. Do not scratch it, because every helmet was demagnetized so the steel would not pull a man's compass off north. And do not cook in it. The manual gives the reason in one line. It is made of steel that is especially treated to give maximum protection against bullet penetration. Heating may weaken it, which means the most famous piece of soldier folklore about this helmet, the pot you could boil coffee and shave and wash in, was a thing the Army was actively telling men to stop doing, because a man warming his dinner was quietly annealing the only armor he owned. Now watch the inch start to fail. The webbing came first. The original suspension inside the liner was rayon, and rayon under load in the field did something the drawings did not predict. It stretched and it did not recover its shape. That web is what sets the standoff. A suspension that sags is a suspension that lets the head drift upward into the inch, and the inch is the whole point. Rayon came out, cotton herringbone twill went in, then the liner itself. The first ones from June 1941 were Hawley liners, compressed paper fibre soaked in phenolic resin, with cotton twill stretched over the outside. In the heat and humidity of the Pacific, they degraded. By November 1942, the Hawley liner was finished, and the Army went to plastic, cloth strips bathed in resin and pressed over a mold by a process out of the Inland Division of General Motors. An interim low-pressure version was, in the Army's own assessment, unacceptable, and it was bought anyway because there was nothing else. Only in early 1944, when the high-pressure process could be run at scale, were the old contracts finally cancelled. So by 1944, the problem is solved. The helmet works, the liner holds, the inch is stable, and almost immediately the Army starts trying to get rid of the whole idea. Because two objects is an expensive way to build a helmet, and every ordnance man could see the obvious improvement. Make it one piece again, out of something better than steel. The attempts run for the next 40 years, and they fail one at a time, each for a different reason. Titanium was real. About 500 ballistic titanium helmets were built in the late 1960s. They worked. They were rejected as too expensive for a gain that was not significant enough. Nylon laminate got further. It was pushed hard from the Office of the Surgeon General, and on paper, it was the future. Its ballistic performance turned out to be no improvement over the M1 at all. Its coverage was only slightly better, and it was never properly engineered around the man wearing it. It made a flak jacket uncomfortable. Work stopped in 1972. Polycarbonate was the impressive one. It stopped things. Then it met the ordinary chemistry of a motor pool, solvents and fuel and cleaning compounds, and it degraded. 40 years of trying to replace a steel pot and a fibre bowl, and the steel pot and the fibre bowl kept winning. But the strangest verdict on the inch came from the Army itself, in the same chapter that explains it. Having written down that a 1-inch offset was deemed necessary, the same historians immediately wrote that the advisability or necessity of the present 1-inch helmet offset requires a thorough investigation and evaluation in the development of any new helmet. And then they named its cost. The most common complaint about the M1 helmet, in their own summary of it, was a lack of stability. The helmet would not sit still. Of course it would not. It was an inch too big on purpose, balanced on a web of straps, on the head of a man who was usually running. That is the honest shape of this story. The inch was never a solved piece of engineering. It was a trade the Army made and then spent decades unsure about, and the men wearing it lived inside the uncertainty without being told. It was finally engineered away in the 1980s when the PASGT helmet arrived, and the standoff came down, and the suspension web gave way to pads. The two helmets became one again, 40 years after the Ordnance Department decided they could not be, which leaves the number. You will hear everywhere that a post-war study by the Operations Research Office found the M1 saved 70,000 men and stopped 54% of the fragments that hit it. The report that gets cited for this does not mention helmets, not once. The 54% has no traceable source at all. The 70,000 is real, and it comes from those same medical historians in 1962, and it is worth quoting exactly, because the sentence after it is the one that never gets repeated. The helmet in the Second World War, they wrote, probably prevented wounds in more than 70,000 men. Then they said that no definite survey had ever been conducted to evaluate the helmet properly, and that a sound statistical correlation could not be derived from what had been collected. The most quoted number about the American helmet is an estimate its own authors said could not be done properly. 70,000 men, more or less, and no way to ever know which ones. What we can know is the geometry. Every one of them walked around inside a steel shell that was deliberately too large, held off his skull by a second helmet, whose only real job was to keep an inch of empty air between the two. The steel got the credit, the inch did the work.